Tonight, America's new era of political violence as police hunt for the shooter who assassinated Charlie Kirk. This is the person of interest wanted by authorities. The FBI say the gunman is of college age and fled into the woods after pulling the trigger.
We have recovered what we believe is the weapon that was used in yesterday's shooting. It is a high-powered bolt-action rifle.
Now, Donald Trump says he will award the Presidential Medal of Freedom to the man he described as a giant of his generation.
I have no doubt that Charlie's voice and the courage he put into the hearts of countless people, especially young people, will live on.
So what is Charlie Kirk's legacy? I'll ask a man who worked and campaigned alongside him, and I'll chart the rise of violence as a form of political protest in the land of the free. Also coming up, the paedophile and the peer. The UK's man in Washington is sacked over his close relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. And life in exile, I'll be joined by the Russian theatre director who dared to criticize Putin's war in Ukraine. That's all coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening. It's a dangerous moment for America. Last night, we brought you the news that the man widely regarded as the de facto leader of the MAGA youth movement, Charlie Kirk, had been shot and killed. He had millions of followers on social media and travelled to college campuses challenging students to prove him wrong. He was also the man credited with helping to win Arizona for Donald Trump in the last election. This is how the US president responded.
For years, those on the radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's worst mass murderers and criminals. This kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today, and it must stop right now.
Well, Donald Trump is right to highlight a spiralling trend in political violence. From the Oval Office, he pointed to the assassination attempt on his life and the murder of a prominent insurance executive. Elon Musk went further, describing the left as the party of murder. But that's not the whole story, is it? Violent rhetoric, the dialogue of division, that's all become commonplace, acceptable even. And it's all led to scenes like this. Hundreds of people storming the Capitol. Crime scene tape outside the home of a Democratic congresswoman in Minnesota after she was murdered. Tonight, as the grief and shock morphs into calls for vengeance, I want to talk about America's tinderbox moment and whether the country could really be on the brink of civil unrest. But first, an update on the manhunt from our US correspondent James Matthews in Utah.
This is a manhunt, and this is how it looks.
Sheriff Department, police force, SWAT team, they were all over.
FBI investigators examined the scene of an assassination as they hunted Charlie Kirk's killer, starting with the roof where the fatal shot was fired. They issued 2 images of what they called a person of interest, a man of university age in baseball cap and shades, wearing a jumper bearing what appears to be the American flag and eagle.
Counting or not counting gang violence?
It was a shocking murder on a university campus that woke up a crime scene with a sense of unreality at what happened here. In place of classes was a press conference about the murder in their midst.
Can you talk to us about their movements, their demeanor?
The suspect blended in well with a college institution. That individual appears to be of college age. We are confident in our abilities to track that individual.
Investigators have gathered a palm print, a forearm imprint, and a footwear impression. This is also key. The escape route taken by the assassin being examined by agents of the FBI. This is where the gunman ran over this road towards this woodland. And in amongst those trees, a high-powered bolt-action rifle was discarded and recovered. Attending a 9/11 memorial, President Trump announced he would honour his old friend formally.
I'm pleased to announce that I will soon be awarding Charlie Kirk posthumously the Presidential Medal of Freedom. The date of the ceremony will be announced, and I can only guarantee you one thing, that we will have a very big crowd.
Charlie Kirk was a significant player in the Republican movement.
My name is Charlie Kirk.
In Utah, arrangements were made to fly his casket home to Arizona aboard Air Force Two. Vice President J.D. Vance flew to Utah to make a last journey with his political soulmate. Overnight at the hospital where they tried but failed to save Charlie Kirk, members of the public paid tribute, some who'd witnessed the horror.
I was doing okay, and then I was putting my 5-year-old to bed, and she had me read her story about love. I just couldn't finish the story. I was thinking about Charlie's little girls, his wife. He was such a powerful human being.
The FBI has issued a reward of up to $100,000 for information leading to an arrest. It is a bounty of some size and a manhunt of some significance. James Matthews, Sky News, in Orem, Utah.
And we'll be speaking to James in a moment, but as the manhunt continues, a clearer picture is emerging of events leading up to the shooting. Our international correspondent Alex Rossi has been piecing together what we know so far.
That's a lot of people, Utah, I'll tell you what.
It was the first stop of his American comeback tour, advertised to attendees as a lively discussion of freedom and America. It started in high spirits, caps thrown into the crowd from the right-wing influencer. It ended with Charlie Kirk killed and the shooter on the run. Before, around 3,000 people had stood waiting for the conservative activist near the Students' Union of the Utah Valley University. Coming up to 12 p.m. when the event started, spectators filled the seating, spilling up into the raised walkways, anywhere people could get a vantage point. He arrived to a big reaction, both jeers and support. This video was a stream of the event filmed by an attendee. Moments before the shot, he was asking students about their political stances. You can then hear the crack of the rifle.
There's been a shooting. We heard shots.
Charlie Kirk was speaking here, in a gazebo just in front of the Environmental Technology building. The shooter was positioned 130 meters away on the 4th floor of the Lozzie Center building opposite. These pictures show a figure lying down on the roof. A second video is filmed at around 12:20 p.m., moments after the shot is fired. We see the shooter stand and move away. There were trees and university buildings nearby, but if the shooter fired from the edge of the roof, they would have had a direct line of sight to where Charlie Kirk was sitting. Police first mentioned the shooting at 12:26 p.m., around 6 minutes after it took place.
And let's be advised, UVU in Orem has had an active shooter at the Charlie Kirk event. We're getting several calls. We're trying to get more information.
Maybe the CS building is just east of the library. He's wearing jeans, black shirt, black mask, long rifle.
Charlie Kirk did have security flanking him. Analysis of the videos from the event show at least 4 men who appear to be Kirk's security team surrounding the stage. Extra measures were put in place for the event. 6 police officers were there, as well as plainclothes officers in the crowds. But people on the scene described a lack of checkpoints, with people being able to walk into the event with backpacks without being searched.
All right, everybody, you need to leave the area.
The FBI say they tracked the killer's movements, saying they arrived on campus at 11:52 and were seen on security camera video ascending stairwells to get onto a nearby roof before firing at Kirk. They said the suspected weapon used in the shooting was a high-powered bolt-action rifle. Audio analysis of the event found the time between the crack and the pop of the gunshot was about 240 milliseconds, suggesting the bullet speed was about 800 meters per second. Police say the shooter disappeared into a residential area behind the campus. In the meantime, they've released this image of a person of interest. Alex Rossi, Sky News.
Let's bring in our US correspondent, James Matthews, who joins me live from Orem in Utah. And James, this is a nation in utter shock. And meanwhile, the manhunt continues.
In terms of press access to information, we had a news conference first thing this morning. There was going to be one this afternoon. We were told that that had been postponed or cancelled due to rapidly developing events. They didn't say what that was, but we don't have any news of an arrest at this stage. We do know there will be a news conference later. Kash Patel, the FBI director, is flying out for that. So we're talking, I don't know, 1, 2, 3 hours. That's interesting. I mean, he faces some tough questions because, of course, he tweeted at one stage last night that the suspect effectively was in custody and it was open and shut. He later corrected that or clarified, updated his tweet to say that the suspect had been interrogated and was being released. So there was that period when the public were being told by the man in charge the killer's been caught, which, of course, changes public behaviour. They go back to the university, they go back in the streets. Danger is over. So that's question number one for Kash Patel. I do wonder if there was going to be some kind of announcement this afternoon, but it's being held back for him. But I mean, clearly that would be fraught with difficulty if it was for some PR announcement, some big PR result, you know, the announcement of an arrest. When an arrest is made, the public need to know that an arrest has been made in timely fashion. That cannot be held for 3 hours because, again, there is much in terms of public behaviour, public distress hinging on the announcement of somebody being detained for this. So that's kind of where we are in terms of news conferences and so on, Yalda. But we got a sense today of how confusing this all had been. We've seen the panic amongst the crowd of 3,000 students, everybody running everywhere. We were up in a dress behind this woodland where the gun was found, where the gunman actually made his escape. And we spoke to a worker there. He was carrying out property renovation. He said the SWAT teams came to us and showed us a picture of an Ozzy Osbourne lookalike. That's how he described it. Long, greasy hair, long leather coat, black face mask on, and round, dark glasses. They said, is this the man who came through this property, you know, in the past couple of hours? They said, yep, yeah, we saw him. That's who came through. But that doesn't bear any resemblance to the individual in these still images that have been released. That's clearly what they're looking at. Baseball cap, short hair, American flag on the jumper, jeans and white trainers. So that remains the focus of the investigation so far. How it's all going, we should know, as I say, Yalda, at this next news conference a few hours away yet.
James, thank you so much, and we will keep across those news conferences and come back to you throughout the programme and evening. Thank you. Well, I'm joined now by Joe Bob Telefi, a Turning Point USA contributor. Thank you so much, Joe Bob, for joining us here on the programme. I know that you were incredibly close to Charlie Kirk. He was somewhat of a mentor to you. How are you doing? Just talk us through how you and your other colleagues at Turning Point are feeling in these moments.
It's nothing short of complete and total devastation and heartbreak. And, you know, as the hours tick by since, you know, we learned of the tragic news, I think more perspective is being drawn in, which only has made it worse for a lot of us, because I know that, yes, there's tragic immediately. But what's also tragic is the fact that we don't get to see what Charlie could have become. Love him or hate him, this guy was a superstar in media, in communication, and by the age of 31 had been able to put together an organization that honestly dominated American politics. And it is a shame and a tragedy that we won't be able to get to see what he could have been in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years. And as you get more perspective and you think about it just a little bit more, unfortunately, it hasn't gotten better. And I think the urgency to carry the mantle that he was carrying becomes more and more a priority in all of us here at Turning Point USA, as well as the conservative movement abroad.
Yeah, Joe Bob, as you say, I mean, other than Donald Trump, Charlie Kirk really was viewed as perhaps the most successful conservative political personality in the United States. What kind of climate of fear do you think this creates now that, people on both sides can't express or won't express their views or would be worried about expressing their views when we see these kinds of political assassinations and a rise of these sorts of political assassinations in the United States?
I don't mean to sound crass at all, but it's irrelevant. Especially on the conservative side, the fear component is irrelevant. I think I stand with all of the conservative, influence, all of the political leaders in the conservative movement. We will be undeterred by any sort of fear that is injected into the system. We will stand strong on what we believe in. Charlie knew that and would have wanted us to do exactly that. And, as far as the political violence go, it's abhorrent, and nobody should tolerate this, and we should all condemn it roundly. But as far as the capacity for fear to stifle the engagement of the conservative community, it will be irrelevant. It won't be a factor in any way, shape, or form.
In many ways, and we've talked about this on the program, Charlie Kirk very much was driving force of MAGA youth. Just talk us through the work that you did with him at Turning Point USA, and especially in the drive to get Donald Trump re-elected, because he had, thousands of activists working, door knocking, canvassing throughout that election campaign period.
Yeah, I mean, without getting too into the details, it is... Many people saw Charlie as a talk show host. They saw him as a guy who went to college campuses and debated, but the layers go so deep into what he was doing, the organization that he built. He has the USA faction that focuses on the ideology, and he's got the action faction that focuses on the political aspect of it. There was a grassroots game. There is a grassroots effort. There is a ground game in all of the major swing states. But as far as Charlie specifically and personally, he was the best communicator of ideas that I've ever seen, that I've ever been around. I had the privilege and opportunity to tour the country with him for about 3 years. I would open the events and he would come in. And generally speaking, I think in most cases, opening speakers would do their part and then they would just leave. I couldn't leave those events because what he was saying was so engaging and enlightening and thought-provoking and interesting. And even if you didn't agree with it, it was just the way that he was able to communicate was unlike any other. Unfortunately, I don't know that we have anybody, but I do know that en masse, I think the movement will again carry on what he was trying to do, both on the engagement in the ideological side and on the political side.
Joe Bob, I have about a minute and a half left, but I wanted to ask you about these calls now for vengeance.
Disavow. Completely and utterly disavow vengeance of any kind against people who disagree with you. This was Charlie's entire point, his whole goal. And right and left should agree on this. Public civil discourse is going away, and that is not good. His entire goal was to go to places and engage with people. He would give you a microphone, and if you disagreed, he would let you to the front of the line. In no way, shape, or form is that normal in what, any sort of system that he was accused of, specifically, quote unquote, fascism. So in terms of how we respond by continuing the message. Vengeance has no place in the conservative movement. outside of bringing the people to justice who are responsible and continuing the message that Charlie was pushing.
Joe Bob Talefi, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme.
Thank you.
Watching The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Still to come on the programme, warnings of a vicious spiral in political violence following the killing of Charlie Kirk. Stay with us.
App gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos, analysis, up at 6%. Podcasts, watching us live.
Joins us live.
All in one place, and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace. The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland. Catholics and Protestants now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19, religion's nothing.
Sky News, the full story first.
Fire, shouts the commander. There's a dash to safety.
We've now got to wait inside the shelter to see if there is incoming.
I'm Deborah Haynes, Sky's security and defence editor. Should Russia's war with Ukraine escalate significantly, pilots like these could be called upon to go into combat for real.
Welcome back to the programme. I just want to focus now on what happens next after the assassination of Charlie Kirk. But to do that, we'll need to look back at America's history of political violence. 4 presidents assassinated, Donald Trump targeted, and just this summer, a Democratic congresswoman murdered. The data proves that even before this assassination, there has been a big increase in terrorism and targeted violence in the United States. 523 terrorism and targeted violence events took place between January and June this year, a nearly 40% increase on the same 6 months in 2024. The number of successful attacks where casualties were recorded has risen more than 50% from 195 in the first half of 2024 to 294 this year. Political violence has seen the biggest rise. 15% of the terrorism and targeted violence events recorded in the first 6 months of last year involved government personnel or facilities. That jumps to 35% for this year. And there is a bigger appetite for the use of force on the right and the left. A recent survey suggested that 40% of Democrats supported the use of force to remove Mr. Trump from the presidency, and about 25% of Republicans supported the use of the military to stop protests against Mr. Trump's agenda. Our US correspondent David Blevins has this report.
A brutal killing in a nation torn. The shooting of Charlie Kirk, exposing the fragile state of American democracy.
Take a look at what happened.
No one is immune to the threat. US President Donald Trump surviving this assassination attempt on the campaign trail.
Breach of the Capitol to the upper level.
The storming of the US Capitol in the wake of the 2020 election, signalling a rise in political violence that continues to shake the seat of power here.
I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat, any elected official across the country, if you are vocal, your life is at risk. I'm going to double down and be more vigilant than I've ever been because this stops now. Enough is enough.
This is about the emergence and uncorking of violence that we're talking about. And it is absolutely gotten to a point that is where we need to really look towards our leaders to lower the temperature.
I love that. Trump, Vance, secure the border.
Charlie Kirk epitomised this era of polarised politics, a hero of the right, debating the most controversial of topics.
I know you're obviously very anti-trans.
No, I'm pro-reality. Taking guns is the beginning of the end of the rest of your freedoms.
His death has ignited a firestorm online, with some calling for the shooting to be avenged with more guns. Will America ever be able to stem the rise of political violence?
We could. The problem is, it starts at the very top, and if the rhetoric is going to always be violent in nature, you're going to see people who feel like that's the response they should have. Also, we clearly have a gun problem in this country. It's too easy to get guns, and gun violence and this sort of violence in many ways, unfortunately, go hand in hand.
On the 24th anniversary of 9/11, America faces a very different threat. In Minnesota, a state senator and her husband were shot dead earlier this year. The ongoing national debates around the First and Second Amendments of the US Constitution, the right to speak freely and the right to bear arms, are dominating politics to the point where they risk overshadowing the most fundamental right of all, the right to life. America seems trapped in its tragic history of political assassination, unable to turn the page from guns to discourse. David Blevins, Sky News in Washington.
Well, I'm joined now by Timothy Clancy, Assistant Research Scientist at the National Consortium for the Study of Terrorism and Responses to Terrorism. Thank you so much for joining us, Timothy, on the programme. As I said there in the introduction, your organisation focuses on cases of terrorism and responses to terrorism. Just talk us through some of the trends that you're currently seeing.
Certainly. Thanks for having me tonight. I wish it was under better circumstances. So our research has looked at the rise in violence in the last several years. And as your statistics pointed out, we've seen a definite rise in violence even before these high-profile targeted killings are taken into account. This targeted violence reflects, I think, the political instability and the civil instabilities that's come out of the pandemic and some of the incidents mentioned like January 6th. These targeted political killings that were mentioned, such as Charlie Kirk, the attempted assassination of President Trump, the Minnesota state lawmaker, these are on top. It's almost like the tip of the iceberg. We've had many times in our country's past, and this is one of them, where a large social division creates an upswell in violence, and on top of that are these high-profile targeted killings. But I think it's important to recognize that this is just the tip of the iceberg, and underneath that is much more violence that we've seen just in the first 6 months this year compared to the first 6 months of 2024.
I mean, Timothy, this is really disturbing that you're saying this is just the tip of the iceberg because, of course, the assassination attempt on President Trump's life and then, of course, the killing of Charlie Kirk, certainly what happened in the last 24 hours has shocked America, shocked the world. But you say that, there's much more and it's much deeper. And frankly, would you say that, we could see more of this kind of thing?
Well, I think it's important to say that this is obviously a cycle, and we have a cycle beginning with the attempted assassination of Trump that has seen multiple attacks in the last year. But we've had these cycles before, and we've gotten through them as a country. When you have these social tensions, for example, from the civil rights area, and you had President Kennedy killed, Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, all in a very short time. That is a secular burst of violence, and it can be very scary to live in the moment. I don't want to underplay the risk we're at, but we have gotten through these periods in the past. What needs to happen now is not just a lowering of the rhetoric from political leaders, but increasingly in social media that makes all this content immediately accessible. We have roles to play ourselves as the own individual influencers and curators. So the politicians need to lower the rhetoric, and everyone needs to lower the rhetoric. And just remember, we can get through this, and we have before.
Yeah, I do want to talk about echoes of this, going back to the 1960s when we saw a series of assassinations, political assassinations in the 60s. And you talk about that being sort of almost spiraling and then the country managing to get itself out. The difference, I guess, is what you've just pointed out there is social media trying to lower the rhetoric on social media is incredibly difficult when there are open discussions about vengeance and taking revenge and responding and how to respond and mobilizing, conspiracy theories. These are the sorts of things that we're now seeing played out in the open, and everyone gets a say, which is quite different to what took place decades ago.
Obviously, that is the big difference, is that everyone has a voice and can use that voice, which is why I think it's important for the political leaders to lower the rhetoric. But increasingly these days, influencers, podcasters, there's a constellation of people who have as much or more influence than any given politician. Obviously, the president, Speaker of the House, they have a lot of influence, but you have these social media influencers who have a role they can play as well. And I think we need to be asking them to lower the rhetoric. And of course, added to that mix is that there are misinformation and disinformation exploited by advisories who are taking advantage of the situation to inject inflammatory rhetoric. Not that we had any difficulty with that before, but they make it worse when they exploit situations like this.
And, will this now change patterns of behavior in terms of, after 9/11, we saw the way security changed around airports. Will this now mean that people are more cautious about certainly, public figures and with profiles to do big outdoor events?
I don't necessarily, I think there'll be a short-term impact on that. But this is not the first high-profile targeted killing in the last year. We've seen several of these events, and after each one, we see a short-term burst of increased security measures. But there really isn't necessarily a national consensus on major activities, as you saw in 9/11, where you had the whole country come together. Congress passed, whether you agree with it or you don't, the Patriot Act, which was sort of a national level response to increase security. I certainly am not going to get in the business of predicting what the president's going to do. The president has a lot of power to implement security features. But I think it's also important to remember that right now, the narrative I'm hearing broadly is that they are attacking us. Some extremists are saying we need to attack back. And those are the voices I think we need to make sure are being lowered, because as long as the narrative is they're attacking us, it's different than if someone says, I'm going to attack you back. And you showed some of those tweets and examples. Those are the voices I think we need to get lowered, because until that narrative switches, we have a tinderbox here. If the narrative in a conflict, civil unrest switches from they're attacking us and this is Democrat or Republican to we need to proactively attack them, then you have a much worse situation. And I think we're on the precipice of that right now. Your own reporting showed that.
Timothy Clancy, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme.
Thank you.
This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, the Russian director and Putin critic Alexander Molochnikov on fleeing his homeland and bringing his production to London.
hear that whistle and that crunch. We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
Welcome back to the programme. Now, 3 years ago, Alexander Molochnikov was a rising star in Russian theatre and cinema. The writer and director worked at the Moscow Art Theatre, and his Bolshoi ballet, The Seagull, was winning awards. Then he dared to criticise Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine, and he was forced to flee. Now, after relocating to New York, he's bringing his production to the UK. And Alexander joins me here in the studio live now. Thank you so much, Alexander, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We'll talk about your journey from Russia and why you were forced to leave. But just talk us through Seagull, the true story. Just explain the title and the premise of your play.
So Seagull True Story is a true story. It's my story. It's about a director who was staging the Seagull, Chekhov's Seagull, as the war started in Ukraine, as Russia invaded Ukraine. And the cultural politics inside Russia changed a lot, and everything started being very censored. And the character of our play is making the seagull as the war starts, so he has to redo the whole thing as the censors tell him, and then he realizes that the seagull is basically dying and it's not his play anymore. So he flees to New York and tries to do it there, where it's also very tough and also very restricted in many ways. And basically it's a play about fighting for your own right to create freely and for your own creativity, for your own voice. Which I'm trying to do first in Russia, then in New York, now in London as well.
Yeah, so I wanted for you to lay out what the play was about, because it does depict your journey, your story, and what you fought against and what you had to take on, which we know is incredibly dangerous. Just talk us through that, because often we have this idea that Russians support Vladimir Putin's war in Ukraine, but actually there were many, especially in the creative space, who said no and left the country or spoke out and were punished.
Well, it's a very scary thing to face, you know, the censorship that came to Russia and generally the power that came to Russia. We have a line there that a poet who spoke out against the war was just tortured with electricity, and one of the poets who was reading on the streets was raped by a dumbbell. And, you know, when you read something like that and somebody's telling you better cut this scene, otherwise you'll have problems, it takes crazy bravery to say, no, I'm going to keep it, because it's just people are getting arrested and getting sentenced for years and years, and you really face this question, am I ready to give up my love to art and do something mediocre and do something I don't want to do, or will I fight for it with a huge risk of getting in prison? So that's basically what happens to our character. In a way, that's what happened, maybe not as directly to me, but I did get threats from the Wagner group with pictures of my parents' houses saying that I should be careful walking around there or I would slip. And it's not exactly because of the art I was doing, but because I was supporting Ukraine social media. And immediately everything that is done and all your art is also under attack. And the great director Zhenya Berkovich is now under arrest still for 7 years. She didn't have time to escape. And I always think of her. And I always think of her in the context of, could I be still working in Russia? Could I just be coming to the rehearsal room feeling that she is in prison? She's my age. We've known each other for many years. And the answer is no. That is why, just in a day like that, I mean in a few months, from a huge space at the Bolshoi Theater, golden, beautiful palace where I was auditioning opera singers, I went all the way down to an abandoned office in New York, which also is a tough journey.
It's a tough journey.
But you feel like you can do what you want. And
you felt free.
Yeah, I was working with the team of actors that now came to London, some of them, and we really did, you know, something we wanted to do. Then later I faced some stuff in America as well that is not as simple. But that's
you mean
not
you couldn't speak out about?
Well, there's a lot you can't speak about. You can't joke about many things. You can't really think about too many things. There is a lot of, it's not censorship really, it's just the culture, you know. There's the cultural change that happened in the US in the last years as well. And it's sometimes a lot you have to learn to understand how you don't make people uncomfortable. I think it's about making people uncomfortable. This is an issue, a worldwide issue today. Everybody is afraid to offend somebody. And in art, it's very hard because to be free, you can't be always afraid to offend. And where that boundary is the question. But I want to say that I think it's not just a play about a Russian director. It could be, I've had Iranian people come to the show and they loved it and they said it's about Iran. I had Chinese people who came said it's about China. I think somebody even coming from, I don't know, Liverpool to London facing the complicity of producers and the tough competition and just trying to do what they really want and not listen to the reviewers, which is so hard, to the producers, or sometimes listen but stay yourself is a tough challenge.
I've got about a minute left, Alexander, but I wanted to ask you, you talked about you being lucky enough to flee, those who were not lucky enough being imprisoned. What about those who went along with the Kremlin and the sort of demands that the Putin regime basically put on artists and directors like yourself?
Well, I mean, everybody makes their choice, and everybody has their own individual situation. Some people, you know, we don't know what they're asked. We don't know how they're tortured. We don't know what choices are set in front of them. Maybe somebody's told, we'll take your kids away, and I know those situations. Somebody adopts kids, they say, we'll take your kids back if you don't support Russia. And it's very tough. It's a huge personal choice, and I wouldn't rush to blame. I think it's a time in general where we shouldn't rush to blame. We should really try to think that everybody had their own story, and we sometimes don't know the full story. So with many people, I'm still in touch, and many people are still there, and they hate it. They hate the regime, but they try to still do something, and actually there are some plays that are still coming out there. But I think our play should come to, because it's also fun, and it's about love, and it's about home, and it's about a huge motherland that sometimes drags you back, but it's also about future, about how not to give up, not to always look in the past, but look forward.
Well, Seagull, true story in London at the moment, and congratulations, and you know.
Come to the show.
Exactly, I was just going to say.
Come to the play, get your tickets.
Alexander, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Well, early in the week, we reported on Benjamin Netanyahu's audacious strike on Qatar. Well, today, he signed an agreement to push ahead with a controversial settlement expansion in the occupied West Bank. Palestinians and rights groups say the development could destroy hopes of a future Palestinian state. Mr. Netanyahu said the population of the settlement would increase by 70,000 people within 5 years. More than 700,000 Israeli settlers now live in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, the British ambassador to the United States is sacked over his links to Jeffrey Epstein.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
I'm Helen Ann Smith. I'm Sky's Asia correspondent, and I'm based here in Beijing.
Go ahead, back white jacket.
Deborah Haynes from Sky News. He called you Daddy earlier.
No, he did it very affectionately. Daddy, you're my daddy. Thank you.
Leicester is on its knees.
They've ripped the soul out of my factory, and there's nothing left.
It is eerily quiet.
It's constantly on the brink of capacity.
There's overcrowding. It's not a new thing.
It's rough.
There's nothing to hide. Why aren't international journalists allowed in?
Are you worried about escalation?
Of course I'm worried about escalation, which is why my focus is on de-escalation.
The region, I think, is on edge because they are anticipating a retaliation.
Iran retaliates for the US attacks.
Founding principle of the alliance, that an attack on one is an attack on all.
Could Putin attack another NATO country within 5 years?
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. Sky News, the full story first.
I'm Martin Brunt and I'm Sky's crime correspondent.
I'm David Blevins and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos, analysis up at 6%. Podcasts, watching us live.
Joins us live.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
I'm David Blevins and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland. Catholics and Protestants now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19, religion's nothing.
Sky News, the full story first.
Welcome back. With escalations in the conflict in the Middle East and Russia's war in Ukraine, the UK's man in Washington has a key role in trying to influence Donald Trump. But today, the British ambassador, Peter Mandelson, was sacked over his ties to Jeffrey Epstein. And the timing could not be worse, with the US president in the UK for a state visit next week. Our political editor, Beth Rigby, reports.
Jeffrey Epstein and Peter Mandelson, the paedophile and the peer. This a friendship that endured even beyond Epstein's convictions, and one that on Thursday ended Lord Mandelson's political career. The Prime Minister and his Foreign Secretary concluding this morning the US ambassador had to go, this minister delivering the news.
The Prime Minister has asked the Foreign Secretary to withdraw him as ambassador to the United States. The emails show, Mr. Speaker, that the depth and extent of Lord Mandelson's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein is materially different from that known at the time of his appointment.
These are the emails that sealed Lord Mandelson's fate. Leaked to Bloomberg News, these exchanges reveal Peter Mandelson remained supportive of Epstein even after he was convicted for sex trafficking underage girls. I think the world of you, he wrote to Epstein on the day he went to prison. And Mandelson suggested the first charge for sex offences against Epstein was wrong, as he urged his friend to fight. Your friends stay with you and love you. But the questions had been coming for months.
In June 2009, did you stay at the apartment in Manhattan of Jeffrey Epstein?
I'm not answering any questions about him.
He was in jail at the time for soliciting prostitution from a minor.
And my knowledge of him is something that I regret. I wish I'd never met him in the first place.
At Prime Minister's questions this week, Keir Starmer was still defending his ambassador.
I have confidence in the ambassador in the role that he is doing.
Sky News understands Number 10 appointed Lord Mandelson despite concerns raised by security services. The leader of the opposition calling for full transparency.
He knew that Peter Mandelson had said that there are more revelations to come. I think that is part of evidence that he has extremely bad judgment. We want to see all the papers and know all the information that surrounds Peter Mandelson's hiring in the first place.
This is not the first time Lord Mandelson's resigned in disgrace. He stepped down as Trade Secretary in the Blair administration over a loan from a colleague he failed to register. He then had to quit again.
I am today resigning from the government.
This time as Northern Ireland Secretary over a cash for passports scandal. But he held on to his constituency of Hartlepool.
They underestimated me because I am a fighter and not a quitter.
And made an eyebrow-raising return to the front bench under Gordon Brown. But Mandelson has always been controversial, even amongst his own.
It's shameful that Peter Mandelson didn't resign in the national interest, in the interest of the government, but he's not that sort of person, so it was right that Keir Starmer sacked him.
When those toe-curling emails were released showing Peter Mandelson clearly supporting a convicted sex offender, it was obvious he had to go. And the Prime Minister did execute a swift about-turn and sacked him. But this is really grave for Keir Starmer. The damage has been done. 2 weeks into a reset, 2 scandals, 2 senior people leaving his government. All of it casts a very long shadow over his promise to clean up politics, and all of it raises serious questions about his political judgment as Prime Minister. It also casts a shadow over the upcoming state visit for US President Trump, with the White House, royal family and the UK government all tarnished by association with sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, an issue they all wanted to avoid, now top of the agenda. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, let's bring in our Mark Stone, who joins me from Washington. And Mark, I'm just going to pick up where Beth has left off in terms of we're just days away from Donald Trump making his second state visit to the UK. And of course, this scandal has erupted, which has resulted in the end of Lord Mandelson's political career.
Yeah, and it would have been awkward, to say the least, if Lord Mandelson had ended up staying on and had gone to the state visit for the reasons Beth just outlined. And it is, I guess, equally awkward that he has gone because he has left a void. I mean, there is no question that this appointment back in January, Keir Starmer's decision to appoint a politician, not a career diplomat, to this key role was high risk, high reward. High risk because, as we now know, Mandelson has all these associations with Jeffrey Epstein, some of which, perhaps a lot of those, Keir Starmer already knew about, and that's a key question. High reward because he is an impressive politician. He is an impressive diplomat, and he managed, without question, I think, to steward the special relationship and put Britain in a really, really good position, the envy of many other nations in terms of trade deals and all the rest of it. So it was always high risk, high reward. But you know, it's clearly absolutely terrible for the Prime Minister. Lord Mandelson has written to staff at the embassy, Britain's biggest embassy. He says it's the biggest privilege of his life. And he goes on to say, I continue to feel utterly awful about my association with Epstein 20 years ago and the plight of his victims. I have no alternative to accepting the Prime Minister's decision and will leave a post I have been so incredibly honoured to serve. Now, in the interim, James Roscoe, the Deputy Ambassador, will take over. He is a man who's in fact served under the Gordon Brown government. He's served deep in Downing Street. He's also served in the royal household. So in the short term, very well placed. But this is awkward indeed.
Yeah, very much so. Mark, thank you so much for bringing us up to date. Well, Donald Trump lands in the UK on Tuesday evening. We'll be covering his every move as he meets the King and the Prime Minister. And I'll be in Windsor, as well as we'll have a team in Chequers on Thursday as well. But we'll be back with all the latest headlines on Monday. Goodbye for now.
Fire, shouts the commander. There's a dash to safety.
We've now got to wait inside the shelter to see if there is incoming.
I'm Deborah Hames, Sky Security and Defence Editor. Should Russia's war with Ukraine escalate significantly, pilots like these